Hi, this is Padmanabhan. I've been listening to Jittu Krishnamurti for more than 45 years, right from my college days. Um, Jittu Krishnamurti brought uh, enormous input to the mankind. Uh, he is, I would say, the discussions he had with various scientists um, and other specialists brought in enormous, what to say, revelationary, I don't know if the word is there, input to the mankind. Brought a lot of insight to us. Uh, yeah. Although he died in February 1986, I had an opportunity to attend to his various discussions right from 1977 till he died in February 1986. Uh, there are many YouTubes now. One, about all the discussion he had with various scientists and other specialists. One can view that. Uh, yeah. Um, the I took great interest in the various discussion he had with scientists, especially with people like Dr. David Bohm, uh, and Shane Back, and a few other Indian scientists also, like P. Krishna, Asit, and a few others also. They're all, beautiful discussion. I don't know how to words to describe that. One has to listen to that seriously to get more, you know, to get the crux of the discussion point. Uh, the uh, the discussions of David Bohm in 1975, it's like various series of discussions like in 1975 on reality, uh, uh, truth, limitation of thought like that. And in 1980, ending of time. In 1983, the future of mankind like that. There are a series of discussions happened with Dr. David Bohm. Um, yeah, um, yeah. So those discussions, uh, I went in depth. I had few observations from that. Um, the core of Jiddu Krishnamurti's teaching, if I have to say, is that thought is a divisive uh, force and divides a man and the whole of mankind. It's a very destructive one. And he was saying that there's a different way of living in which thought doesn't have a place. Yeah. Um, and taking a cue from this particular point, I've drawn a presentation, of course, depend based on other, videos and other discussion audios that were made available. I went into that and I have drawn a presentation. I thought it's a different way of looking Krishnamurti's discussion itself. It's the same thing what he said, and I try to draw the presentation. I have different dimensions I want to present this one. Uh, I mean, those who are well versed in Krishnamurti's discussion may as well. I want them to validate this one, and for the others also can, um, go view this and may give your comments to this, right? Um, so with this note, I'll straight away get into the presentation from now. Okay. Um, this a simple presentation I have made, uh, which is reflecting on your brain and the thought process. I call it as a psychological perspective. Well, I'm not a brain specialist. Uh, I'm not a brain specialist. Uh, yeah, it's just a common man's view, understanding of what the brain and the thought process, and of course, these are This perspective has been given by Krishnamurti. In the sense, one listens to that and understand this way it functions uh, based on their own experience as well. So that's what I have made it over here. And let me get into this. The various incidents that happen to an individual are sensed by the various senses, and they are passed on to the brain. Right, the brain, as you know, is the core of the central, processor for the man. Let me call it like that, and that the data, let me say, the various information it receives from through the senses. Um, it receives and record. Not only it receives and record, it also acts. The brain acts based on the information it receives. Where it has to act instantly, it acts, and where it has to act at later point of time, it acts. That's how the full function we all know as that. Uh, yeah, so that's simply said, but I'm trying to introduce here something like there's something called a pure brain process and other which is a thought tool based process. We'll go furthermore on that. Yeah. See, typically, what is the data that is um, in the information that is received from the senses are recorded into our memory cells by the brain, and the brain uses it as and when it's required. That's what a simple understanding. We're also trying to introduce here as the pure, as there's something called the pure brain process, and there's something called thought tool process. Thought tool is still is an I don't know what to call ancillary of thought brain process, or it's another call as kind of a child process from brain. One can call in which way, but at the end of the day, thought is part of the brain process. Yeah, thought tool is a brain is a brain child, you can call it as. So when the thought tool is invoked, as against non-invoking is one and the invoked state is one. We'll go with that presently. When the thought tool is invoked, the thought tool for it action goes through what is called as a thought database, right? This thought database is nothing but what to say, uh, is created from the memory cell. Uh, uh, and I can call it an abstract also in one sense. And from the thought database, the thought tool acts. When the thought tool, it's not just the data from the for the information that is already stored. When the thought tool is used, the thought database comes into play, and that has got other facets to that attached to that. Fundamentally, it's a limited data that is received, that is what stored in our brain, or rather the thought database, and that is what used with thought. So at any time, the conclusions or the the data that the thought tool is exposed is limited, and so its actions are also limited. That is one. And it is a fragmented data. I'll come to this presently. What is fragmentation? Because that is a very important element. In fact, it's David Bohm, Dr. David Bohm, and Krishnamurti went detailed as to why the data is fragmented. Right, we will come to that. That's a very interesting also. But what is more important is that there is something that acts, which is the self or the ego that acts whenever the thought tool uh, um, is invoked. What that ego comes along with, it comes with a package, the whole lot of comparison. envy, greed, what to say, um, pleasure, pain, all the other things that go, which makes man to suffer, all are part of uh, this ego process, or the self process, or the powerful process. When they act, when these elements act, uh, the conclusions are will be biased, or it can be, it might be very objective, or in other words, it will be a highly it's rather than say highly, there'll be irrationality that will be present whenever the thought tool is present, right, or rather invoked, right. On the other hand, when the pure brain directly access memory sets, um, uh, you know, uh, there is nothing like, it's a pure action that comes from the brain, and that will have, what to say, limitations to not well. There will be limitations in terms of the technical data, but on a psychological sense, there is no self, there is no limitation that comes to play, if I may say, right? Um, Take for an instance, suppose you go on the road, suddenly somebody is falling or hit by a vehicle, you go and help. Those are very pure brain process. Immediately, the brain acts, or rather, the man acts. It goes in help. That's fine. That I call as a pure brain process. Whereas somebody thinks and acts, right? Then there are many. Then the negativeness that are involved in this, the so-called the self, comes into play, right? One can see for oneself all this divisiveness that are there in these things, and it can only see there's something as a thought is playing a trick, or whatever one can say. Actually, it is very difficult to understand whether it's a pure brain process or a thought process. Invariably, will not be no. It's only we'll think that it's a thought process, or it's a pure or it's a brain process. We will be saying. Actually, there, and I'm trying to distinguish over here, is that there's something called a pure brain process, as against that there's something more a thought rule based processes. And so, how to know? I mean, we have been acting when invariably we have been acting this intertwined manner only. What I'm trying to say is that there is something called you can be aware of this thought tool process, and if you are aware, um, that thought tool process is a highly what to say, divisive, or what to say, a negative force, the brain itself can stop. I'll come to that with more slides. I'm trying to present the data. So there is a necessity to arrest the thought tool, and necessity is the thing, is not you feel, the brain itself has to feel that. Yeah. And so when it feels, it will stop the thought pool. And for that to happen, if this is to happen, if one sees the necessity, how it will know that the thought tool is acting is that there are many indicators, like there will be pleasure, there will be pain, there is anxiety, fear, and so on. Just stepping. Now, this makes us to know that the thought tool is used. Now, well, it's okay, it's been happening. Many may think like it is normal to have that, but one sees that the effect of the negative effect of the presence of the thought tool, and feels for it, and have an insight that is really the damaging thing for all, and it brings enormous pain to the man. And then the brain itself, if such is the way it is so felt, the brain itself can stop the thought tool, by which the only at any time the pure brain process, or the most intelligent action that can come from the man, can happen with the pure brain. It can happen. So that's what I've kind of concluded. Most important help from the brain itself. The insight that the thought tool is limited, and whatever it brings as a solution, conclusion, action is always limited and divisive, which is a very important thing. The self that is there, it makes us to any action coming out of that is divisive. And so, with this deep insight being felt, yes, so the brain will understand. Like today, when you have a lit a fire, you will not touch the through the hand. You will not touch the fire because it's not that you're thinking and then okay, I should not touch. It's not a conclusion. You have it and does that. It's a brain itself stops it, right? That's a kind of an it's brain intelligence, one we can say, skin intelligence you can call, or whatever. Here we are calling that through the insight, the brain can stop this thought being limited. It will not touch that. And um, every nanosecond, I want us to be aware that the thought tool is playing. And the moment you're aware of it and you're so sensitized, then the brain itself can stop. That's what we're trying to say over here, right? You know, there are many ways to understand this aspect. This one can also call as the consciousness on which once what to say one is playing upon. The consciousness is of the man is there has to be emptied. If at all I have to quote Krishnamurti's words, has to be emptied, which is can happen when the thought tool is not used. Then there'll be a pure brain process. Still, there'll be some consciousness. He calls that, and he says it's a different consciousness. Well, I'm trying to map it to his words that way. But what one can see for oneself, if this thought database is not used, the so-called normal consciousness that is there, which are so disturbing, so violent, so all the things that are happening in the world are stored in the consciousness of the mankind. That will be coming to, we are all connected, you know that. And of the consciousness of the whole of the mankind is involved in this. And that will be used by us whenever the thought tool is used. So that consciousness is made empty when the thought tool is not there. So that is a possibility. The other way to see is that thing, thought tool is so-called finite, whereas brain process, in terms of technical data, there is a finiteness. What is stored is the memory is used. But there's because the self is not acting, there'll be different energy that will be acting upon. It will have an infinite way of bringing out, action, if I can call that, which will be very intelligent action when the pure brain process acts. So that's what one can say. Again, in effect, in conclusion, the only way of living, if I say, it's a direct perception by the brain uh, without the thought tool being used, because there is no ego in action, a pure brain in action, which will bring infinite capacity to the brain into play, and the action will have a compassion in itself, within itself. And so, whatever it does will be without any limitation. And if at all I have to use the word of Krishnamurti, it will be the perfect action at any point of time. At the end of the day, man has to act. And this action today, whatever he does, is further dividing mankind and bring more violence and whatnot. You can talk all the negative things come into play. We're saying that whatever Krishnamurti says, I'm trying to say here, is that with this kind of a pure brain process, one can bring not only the right action for himself when he lives without conflict or contradictions, and he not only is that, he lives for beautifully for himself. He also brings peace to the world. He brings the right action to the world, and so it's kind of the right action that one should do is being manifested at any point. With that note, I conclude with this the presentation. There are a lot of things that we can talk on this uh, about this one, uh, uh, especially the thought tool, the meditation aspect, which Krishnamurti discussed. Everything is related over here. For now, I stop this video, and we can catch up. We can have ponder out further questions on this one. Okay. Okay, that good. Thanks for listening. With this, I conclude this recording. Right.